Welcome to part 9 of the Time tutorial series. In this series, we're going to cover rendering, compositing, and possibly video editing. So there's only one thing that I've changed since the last file, and that is on the back side of this, I actually separated two sections and added the cell fracture to those sections, and just to give me some more debris that I can have in the shot. Maybe move some of this stuff a little bit more out this way so it could be seen by the camera. Anyway, so that's pretty much the only difference between the last tutorial and this one. So let's go ahead and go File. Let me frame this. That's good. File, Save As, and save it as Time 7. So let's go to the Rendering tab, this right here. Now I'm going to quickly go through these. Number one is you have the dimensions and the frames. We've already kind of gone over this, but you have some presets in here, or you can manually type in X and Y dimension. This option right here is how much percent of the full image it's going to render. So right now it's going to render half 1920 by 1080. I'm going to bring this all the way up so I get a full 1920 by 1080 render output. You can have a start and end time for your frames, and then your frame rate. If you're outside the United States, you'll probably use 25 or 23. But inside the United States, you're going to use 24, 29.976, or even 30. Now, if you want real smooth animation, of course, you'll bring it all the way up to 60. So let me minimize that tab. So anti-aliasing. Aliasing is this weird checker pattern that goes on the side of the objects. Usually in the 3D render that doesn't appear too much, but if it does, you definitely want this on. And if it's a lot, then you probably want to increase the amount. Now just remember, the more this is increased, the longer time it's going to take to render. The next section down is sampled motion blur. We've already gone through this, but I want to talk about how this is being applied to not only the sparks, but also these pieces right here. That's because we built these off of an animation. If you go back to here and look at duplication, it's set to frames. And let me scroll all the way down. You'll notice that the ticker for the spline is set to animation path, or path animation. So it thinks that these things are moving. So it's going to apply motion blur to them. And we don't want that. On top of that, we want to maybe separate these out to make the scene look like this whole area was damaged by whatever happened. So to do that, we need to apply the duplication. And what we're going to do is, with the object selected, let's do the inside one first. Go Object and go to Duplicate Objects. Not Duplicate Objects. We're going to go Object and Apply right here. And you're going to make duplicates real. So Shift Control A. All right. So now each one of these is an own object, and motion blur will no longer be applied. So let's click this one. Object, Apply, Make duplicates real. Shift Control A. All right, so now that gives you the ability to grab these pieces. Let me hit period on the keyboard to frame it, and move them out, position them, rotate them. To rotate maybe on the Z-axis, maybe the X-axis. There we go. Something like that, and start moving each one out. So wherever you want to put it. My suggestion is, if you really want the scene to look real, spend time trying to figure out what would really happen. What really happened to this? Did it explode from internally out? Was it hit by something? Did it just decay? Because that's going to dictate how these pieces floating around is going to look. Now, in my case, because I don't have enough time to sit in this tutorial and actually go through that, I'm just going to randomly position these. Okay, so I've got all the pieces aligned. I probably actually accelerated that section of the tutorial to make it look like I did it really fast. So before I go any further with this file, I actually want to create an edited file of a movie clip I'm going to place on the face of this pocket watch. Some historical video that maybe I'll play inside of just the face. So let's go ahead and save what we have. File, Save, and go File, New. We're going to load up a new Blender file all by itself. Okay, in the new Blender file, we're actually going to edit some videos. So we're going to switch this layout to video editing. And I don't need this window, so I'm going to grab this corner and drag it over to the right and then back to the left so it goes away. And let's see here. So I went online, and number one, you probably want to look up supported video formats for Blender. just type in supported video formats for Blender and you'll get the information that you need. So it's all here. I'm going to come over to the atomic bomb test. So I found that most of my footage came from archives.org. If I hit back, all I did in Google is typed in free atomic bomb footage, and this link right here, archives.org, popped up. And to get this video, all I needed to do was right click on this and say save link as, and save it where I needed it. So I created a folder in my tutorials time footage. So this is where I'm going to save all my videos that I download from online. Now these are free videos to use, that's why I chose these. And they're just various different pieces of history. So let me go ahead and minimize this. Okay, so I need to get a video clip inside Blender. To do so, in fact, actually, I'm going to change the layout a little bit more. I'm going to switch this tab to timeline. So I can drag it way up here. So I have my timeline controls. And I'm going to switch this tab down here to video sequence editor. Now this one as well is video sequence editor, but it's a different format view. So it's showing you the playback window as opposed to the nodes. So that's the nodes, that's the playback window. Same thing for down here. So I'm going to go ahead and go add, and we're going to add a movie, and we're going to go into our export folder. Actually not export, it's the footage folder. Inside the footage folder, I'm going to choose a file. So let's say I select this first one, click open movie clip. Now before I do anything else, let me grab this corner here, and not like that. I'm going to drag it up, or drag it out, but like this to the left. And I'm going to click this and go to user or properties. Yep. So I'm going to switch the properties value in here. I'm going to go 360 frames because that's how long our other animation is. And I'm going to set the frames per second to 30 because that's what our other animation is set to. And I'm going to set it to 100% for the playback. And you can see here when I scale it, increase or decreases the size of the actual 1920 by 1080. And is there anything else in there I want to check? I might as well automatically set up my output. I am going to output a video file from this. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to choose where I'm going to save it to. So I'm going to save it to my, do I want footage? No, I'm going to save it to my export folder. So in here, I'm going to type in footage 1. I'm going to say accept. So that's where it's going to save to. And I might as well make sure it's set to H.264. You can choose any format you want. I'm going to do H.264, and I can choose black and white or RGB color. That's up to you. So that's set. All right, so our properties are set. Let's come back to the video editing window. I'm going to select this top green, light green piece and hit erase, and I'm going to select the blue piece. Now to zoom in and out, scroll wheel, or you can grab this little icon right here and drag it out, and you zoom out. So I need to get my edit down into inside this area here. So let me just find a piece of this clip that I like. So I'm going to click and drag my time slider, and I think maybe this area where they're firing is kind of cool. So you can go down to strip and say cut or K on the keyboard. Let's select the first part, hit X to erase it, and I like the second part, so maybe just a little bit of it, something like that. And let me hit K on the keyboard and erase this whole second piece. So there's one piece for my video. Let me scrub all the way back over to here, and I'm going to zoom in. Obviously, it's way too long for what I'm going to do because I want to cut a couple clips. Now, if I hold down Control, it will snap to the, if I'm moving it, it will snap to the time slider. There we go. All right, so I'm going to drag this back, something like that. Okay, so that's interesting. All right, next clip I'm going to use is, let's go ahead and go add movie clip. And let's see here, we have Atomic Bomb. I'm going to use that at the end. Government Archives, let's do the hit speech. Click that. I'm going to select this piece, hit X. And of course, you're going to be using your own footage. Now you notice because my time slider was just above this one, it put the new video edit on a new layer. So this is an Adolf Hitler speech, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Okay, so let's go about there. I'm going to hit K on the keyboard, and I'm going to delete this, scrub this a little bit, something like that. I'm going to hit K again, delete the second part, select this piece and move it over. I'll even drag it down to this timeline. I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to hold down Control, take my time slider and snap it to the end of this. Grab this, hold down Control and snap it. So there we go. So now we have these two video clips cut together. Let's go ahead and grab another one, add movie clip. I'm going to do government archives, add movie. I'm going to delete this, select this. Let me go ahead and zoom out. And in this case, I remember a flyover. There it is. Okay, so maybe about there. K on the keyboard, delete, and I'm just going to scrub this to about there. K and delete. So that's the next piece I have. Let's go all the way to here. Zoom back in. Grab this piece, oops, and hold down Control to snap it. All right, so the last piece I want to grab is the atomic bomb footage. So I'm going to go movie, atomic bomb, and let's delete this piece. And you can see here, boom, that's pretty cool. So let's just cut it there, maybe delete this. And it looks like I need a little bit more of it, but that's fine. I can always open it back up by grabbing the edges. So let's see here, holding down Control, locks it into place, and let's go with 361 frames, just to be on the safe side that we went all the way. All right, so there is our footage put together. You do have properties for each footage piece. You can actually animate some alpha channel if you wanted to blend between them, so you stack them on top of each other and blend them. I'm not going to do any of that, but just to show you that it's there, you have a lot of options over here as well to play with. And of course, you can go through the markers or menus down here to see what else you can do with the clips, but I'm not going to go through any of that. I'm happy with what I have right now, and I've already set the output. And I've set the size, and I've set the start and end time. Actually, start time needs to be 0. So it matches exactly my other animation, and I think I'm good to go. So I'm just going to click the animation button. This is going to render out the animation sequence. It's going to save it as an .h264 file, and I'm going to go ahead and pick it up after it's done. Okay, so it just finished the render. I'm sure I can go find it within the time, export, and there it is. So my footage 1. And it's set as an AVI. Did I set it as an AVI or did I set it as an H264? H264, so it saved it as a AVI file. Interesting. Okay, so moving forward, let's go ahead and go File, Open Recent, and times 7. Okay, so we're back in our main file. Now we're going to start prepping this for rendering. So first of all, if you notice down here, I have a bunch of different little dots on a bunch of different little gray squares. Well, these are layers in Blender. And right now we want to have everything on one layer. So I'm going to go ahead and select all with A on the keyboard. I'm going to come to Object, and we're going to go Move to Layer, which is also M on the keyboard. And I'm going to click on the first layer, and you see here, everything now has been moved to Layer 1. So if I click on any of these other layers, I'm not going to see anything. I'm just going to see Layer 1. All right, so we want to set it up. First, we need to focus on the particle system, or the sparks. So let's go ahead and work on those real quick, because I know they have a lot of cleaning up to do. So first of all, let's get them on their own layer, because we're going to render them out separately as an individual PNG sequence, because we have to apply the sample blur, or the sampling motion blur to them. If I did that to this entire scene, this would take probably a year on this computer to render. As opposed to just doing it to the particle system, it would probably take about half an hour to an hour. So that's why we're doing this. Let's go ahead and open this up a little bit, and we're going to scroll through until we find all the particles. And remember, we named them. All right, so here's particle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so those are all the particle systems in my scene. I'm going to go ahead and hit M on the keyboard, and I'm going to move them to layer 2 for now. And if you go into layer 2, you'll see that now the particle systems are there. So let's go ahead and start cleaning some of these up. I modified their settings to be inappropriate for rendering because I was trying to adjust their position and all that. So just to make sure, I'm going to go to the particle system and make sure that under rendering, emitter's not checked. And I think these are fine. Yeah. These are all fine. And then I'm going to go to the material section. I'll start with this one. And I need to make sure it's set to halo. And I have the lines. In fact, let's just brighten the color up a bit and go through and do that to each one of these. If you didn't do any of this, obviously you won't have to waste your time. Looks like these just need color adjusting and the lines reactivated. So that should work. All the particle systems now should be set appropriately with the extra lines. All right, to actually enhance this effect, I might want to add a light to each one of these. To illuminate the objects on this scene. So first I'm going to use this scene to build my lights, and then I'm going to put them on layer 1. So let's go ahead and hit Shift A, and we're going to go down to, where is it? Lamp, point. Okay, now we want to align this lamp to, let's say, one of these particle systems. So with the light selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the first particle system. And I'm going to, let's see, these two are selected. We're going to go to Object, Transform, Align Objects. Now, we have to open up our Tools panel. And you can see here's the properties for Align Object. So I'm going to click on the X and Shift-Select Y and Z. So now that forced the particle system to move to where my second selection was, the particles. Or forced my light, sorry, to move to my particle systems. I think I said that wrong. Anyway, so now you can see that the light is moved. So you always want to select the light first, then the particle system. So with this light activated, I'm going to go ahead and go into the properties for the light. In fact, we need to deselect it first, then go into the properties for the light. So give it maybe a little yellow tint and probably increase the inverse square. I'm going to leave that. Let's increase the distance, but let's turn on sphere. Okay, so maybe something like this. And I want it fairly large because I was playing with this earlier. And again, this is fall off. So maybe even do 1.5 for the energy level. Okay, so with this selected, I am going to rename this guy. And I'm going to say particle underscore light. So I can keep these things really organized. 1. So my particle light 1 is with my particle systems. So now I can actually just copy this guy, Control C, Control V to paste it. And this time I'm going to select particle 0, 0, or particle 1, 0, 0, 1. And again, to position it to where the other particle system is, I'm going to select both and make sure that the particle system is the second selection, Object, Transform, Align Objects, and there you have it. Now, I think I want to animate these systems going, so let me go ahead and hit the play button. Okay, so that was the first one. This is the second one. I'm just going to let it go through and run the simulation. All right, for now that's good. So let's see here. If we scrub this, all right, that particle system starts at frame, what? 60? Okay, so at frame 60, I'm going to set the light. Let's make sure we just have the light selected. So this light with that particle system, and we're going to set the energy to 0. And then I'm going to right click on it and say insert keyframe, or you can hit I on the keyboard. So now I've set a keyframe of 0 at frame 60. And then I'm going to scrub the timeline. Probably do about there, and I'm going to bring this up to 1.5. And then I'm going to hit I, or you can right click and say insert keyframe. All right, so now I have it starting at 0, moving up to 1.5, and then I'll have it fade off to 0. There we go. Again, I hit I to set a keyframe. So you can see down here I have the 3 keyframes. Voila. So let's scrub this. Where does the other one start? I think the other one starts later. So let's go ahead and, All right, so this is the next particle, or the first actual particle system to emit particles. So let's go about there. Maybe it's frame 40. Yeah, frame 40. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control C, Control V on this light, and I'm going to select it. And I'm going to go ahead and select the particle system. Oops, I'm going to hold down Shift to select it. Wait, which one is it? Oh, it's the bottom one. Okay, so let's go back to frame 40. And select this light, select this particle system object, transform, align objects, and it automatically does it because we already have everything selected in here. So, all right, that's done. What else do we want to change? We need to change the time of the light. So let me click off of this. Let me select something else. There we go. Okay, so these keyframes need to start at frame 40. To do so, we're going to open up the curve editor. So I'm going to drag this over. I'm going to hit T and N to hide the properties and tool panel and switch this to graph editor. All right, and so I'm going to zoom in here. I need to get these particles to start at frame 40. So I'm going to go ahead, they're already selected. In fact, let me just hit A to deselect them, then A again to reselect them to make sure that's all I have selected. And I'm going to hit G on the keyboard to grab, and I'm going to hit X to make sure I'm just moving them along the X axis. Boom. So now, this light will light up and go away. Okay, so that's those two are set correct. Let's see. 1, 2, then I have this one right here starting to emit, so let's create a light for that. I'll select this light, Control C, Control V, select it in here, select the particle system, go ahead and choose, oh wait, make sure I only have one light selected. And Shift, there we go. Object, transform, align objects, and boom, we're done. And this particle system starts at probably at frame 60. Yep. So that's actually perfect. Why would that one start? Okay, so these two start at the same time. That's fine. But it looks like this one lasts a lot longer. So we might want to play with the light value going up and down. So let's go ahead and we can zoom in here if we want. Oops, I'm going to undo the move. So let's say we're going to value 1, back down to 2.2. Why would that be 2.2? This value needs to be 0. Oh, no, that's the alpha. Oh, we're on the texture. I need to be on the light. So let me select the light. There we go. Okay, so let's just scrub this a little bit past and set the value to, let's say, 0.5. And hit I on the keyboard. And then go a little bit further, set the value to 0.2. Actually, no, let's go up. So let's go 1, I. Actually, we're going to go back down. Let's go 0.2, I. And this one, I'm going to grab this keyframe. I'm going to hit Y on the keyboard, so I just move it on the Y axis and bring it up a little bit. I don't really want it to go down to 0 anymore while it's completely on. I just want it kind of vibrate bright and dark. So we'll go here, and then we'll go maybe about here. Type in 1.5. Enter. I. Scrub a little bit more. Let's go 1. Actually, let's go 0.8. Scrub a little bit more. So that's all I'm doing. I'm just changing the values to go up and down. Okay, so as you can see here, I've got it jumping up and down in brightness over time to emulate like something is like two wires are clicking against each other, or two metal pieces are scraping each other. All right, so that should be interesting. Okay, so that light's done. Now my suggestion is you go through and finish the last two lights off. I'm going to go ahead and drag this over like this. I don't want to waste any more of your time in this tutorial to repeat this process, so let me go ahead and save. I'm going to finish it off and come back. I'm back. I finished out the lights. I created the animations for each one, and I also increased the radius or distance for each one to 25. Okay, so I think that's pretty much good for this setup. So let's go ahead and hold down Shift and select on the first frame. And do we have these on both frames? Let me make sure. Frame 1, frame 2. Doesn't look like we have the lights on frame 2, and we need them on frame 2. So let me jump back to frame 1 and go through and select every single light. I'm going to select them by the ring so I don't accidentally select the particle systems, because I definitely don't want those on frame 1. So with all the lights selected, or I could have selected them in here, I'm going to hit M on the keyboard and move them. I'm going to hold down Shift and add them to frame 1. In fact, just because a good measure, I'm going to add them to frame 3 too, because I think we might use something on layer 3. These are layers, not frames. So you have layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3. These lights are going to be added to all 3. And now we can hold down Shift and select layer 1 as well. So we're seeing both layer 1 and layer 2. Let me go ahead and hit the rewind button, and I'm going to run the particle simulation so that way it interacts with everything that's in this scene. So play. Actually, I'm going to stop that. Excuse me. I forgot to add a deflector to, or collision modifier to this object. So I'm going to go ahead and go into collision, and I'm going to make sure it kills the particles, and I'll just increase the dampening and the friction 100%. All right, and that again is to the outer ring. I'm going to click on the face one. I think I already had a collision on it, but I'm going to increase these to 100% as well. Before I run the particle system again, I need to put it on all 3 layers. That way it interacts with everything that has a collision modifier. If a particle system is on a different layer than the actual collision object, they will not interact. So I need to have the particle system on all 3 layers just to run the sim. So let me go ahead and click on the middle layer here, so layer 2, and click A on the keyboard to select everything. I'm going to hit M on the keyboard to move to layer, and I'm going to shift click the first layer and click it again. Now the reason why I have to do it twice is because the lights were already on it, and we're just trying to move the particle systems. And then I'm going to hit M on the keyboard again, shift click the last layer, and click it again. So now the particles are on all 3 layers, which is what we need for the sim. So now that that's set, let me go ahead and shift click all these layers down here so we can see them all. And I'm going to go ahead and rewind to the first layer, or sorry, to frame 0. I'm going to jump over, let me scroll down to the particles. Okay, those are the particle lights. Here we go, particles. And I'm going to select the particle simulation, or sorry, particle properties. And let me minimize some of these. All right, the tab I need is cache. So let me open this up, because we're actually going to cache this now, or otherwise known as baking it. Now I do want to disk cache it, so it saves it to my hard drive, and I want to use the library path of my file. So that's all set, right? And I don't want any compression on it. I think everything is good. So let me just go ahead and click bake, and it should be, actually we're going to click bake all dynamics. So every particle system in here that gets baked. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and I'm going to let it go through and bake all the actual particle system, let it run. So I'll be right back. All right, it just finished. Now just to show you what it did is it created a folder within my 3D folder called blend cache _ _time7, and this is where it stored the cache file. And these can get very big. These can actually run a couple gigs depending on how many particles or simulations you're running in your file. So let's go ahead and hit the rewind button and hit play real quick just to make sure that the particles are interacting correctly. That looks good. Particles are coming out correctly here. There we go. All right, so that's the way you're going to make sure that your sim is ran correctly. Now that we've run the simulation and we've baked it, which means we don't have to keep rewinding and playing to run the simulation, the particle sim, what we could do is go back to go back to selecting my particle systems. In fact, let's just click on layer 2 and click A on the keyboard to select all, and we're going to hit M, and we're going to go ahead and just click on layer 2, so that way everything is, the particles and the lights are all in layer 2. Now I'm going to come in here and grab the particle lights. This is why we rename things. And just shift click each one of these and hit M again and make sure we shift click on the layer 1 and 3. So that way they affect both those layers. And I think we're good to go. So let me come out of, let me hold down shift and select all 3 of these layers. There we go. Okay, so we've run the particle systems. We're good to go now. So let's set it up to where we just render out the particle system itself. We're going to go into the layers tab here. And with the layers selected, we're going to go ahead and choose, this is the scene layers. These are the render layers. So this is what I'm going to render out. So I'm going to choose the second layer. I only want to render out the particle system by itself. I want to make sure I uncheck sky because I don't want a background in the environment right now. So with this off, I'm going to actually be able to put an image back here later on, leave it as a transparent, or in our case now, we're going to composite the particle system back in with the scene. So anyway, like I said, we're just going to render out the particle system, but I want to mask out the elements that would be in front of the particle system. So I'm going to choose the first layer as a masking layer. So it's going to create a mask for all these little pieces that would be in front of the particle system. And we should be ready to go. So mask, particle system layer. All right, so let's jump back to the rendering tab and let's choose the location of the render. So I'm going to put it in export and I'm going to create a new folder in here because we're going to render single images. So I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this Sparks. And I'm going to double click on it to go inside of it. And I'm going to call the render output Sparks. And click accept. I want to make sure it's set to a PNG RGBA. I want to make sure my dimensions are 100%, 0 to 360 frames. All right, so everything seems to be ready. Just double checking everything real quick. And I've got both layers viewed for selection, but only one is going to render. So let me go ahead and click the animation button for render now. I'm going to stop the tutorial, but as you can see here, it's not rendering anything because it's still on frame 1. Oops, actually I need to stop this. Cancel. I forgot one last thing, and that is sampled motion blur. Need to have that on for the particle systems. Remember, because we want to have a blur affect them. So again, this is only going to be rendering out the particle systems. I'm going to click animation again. I think it actually already rendered out some frames. It rendered one out. So let me go ahead and delete that. And let's go ahead and click animate. And now it's going to go through and render. So I'll stop the tutorial now and I'll come back here in a sec. All right, so Blender's done rendering. Let's go into the folder. You can see here, here's all the PNGs that it created. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. All right, now we have all the external elements that we're going to import into Blender. That's the particle system and the movie clip that we edited. So I'm going to switch back over to 3D view. You got a few things to set up for the compositing, and then we should be ready to render out a frame and composite everything together. Okay, so number one, I want to separate out the face to a different layer because I want to apply the video just to the face. So 2 separate controls within the compositing nodes. So I'm going to go ahead and select the face, make sure I have it selected, I do. And I'm going to hit M on the keyboard. I'm going to move it to layer 3. Okay, so now it only exists on layer 3. If I click layer 3 down here, I have those lights that we created for the particle systems and this. Now I actually want to bring over the other lights too, because again, these other lights are not affecting my particle system, or sorry, not my particle system, my face, because they're not on the same layer. So with them selected, I'm going to go ahead and hit M on the keyboard. And I'm going to roll over the 3rd layer. In fact, actually I need to hold down shift. I want them on both layers. So holding down shift puts them on multiple layers. Just make sure that that's what you have set up. And now if I click on the 3rd layer, I have the lights and the face. So that's good. And of course I wanted these lights there too, because just in case they affect the edges when they light up, it's probably going to be a good thing. So I'm going to hold down shift and select all 3 layers to have them all 3 visible. So I'm going to hit 0 on the keyboard to activate the camera view. I don't have to be in camera view because Blender always forces the camera view to render. Of course you can come down here, click camera. Okay, so now let's get the layer nodes set up correctly for rendering this out. So first of all, let's choose a frame that would be interesting to composite together or have as visible when I'm compositing, because ultimately this is going to apply to all the frames. But I need something that I can see both the particle systems and maybe the overall clock. So I maybe choose this one, or I think this one would be kind of cool. Did I lose my deflector? No. Huh, that's interesting. That one's spraying a little bit more than I thought it would be. So let's go maybe something like that. All right, so with this frame, going to be the frame for my particles and my compositing, I'm going to go to my render layers, and I'm going to rename this first one Pocket Watch. Okay, so that's my first render layer. I want it to render out the first layer. So even though I see all three layers in the scene, I'm only going to be rendering the first layer with this Pocket Watch, and I want no masking. I want to make sure the sky is unchecked as well. So I'm going to hit the plus sign, and this one I'm going to render out the face. And that means that I'm going to render out the third layer, because remember the face was on the third layer, and I want to use the first layer as a mask. So all these elements that are in front of the face, I want it to mask out so they're still in front of the face. The tickers, the numbers, these broken pieces, all that stuff needs to sit in front of the face, and this will help mask it correctly. And we don't need to render out a particle layer because that's what we're going to import. That's why we rendered it out. Make sure I uncheck sky. Now I am going to add a render pass to this just to show you what happens when you set up render passes. It gives you the ability to affect each one of these in the nodes so you can control them. Like sometimes I'll use a shadow pass so I can add a blur to the shadows to soften them out if I need to, or change their color to create some kind of cool, I don't know, some crazy weird scenario of color changing shadows. But anyway, moving forward, I'm going to go ahead and check diffuse just to show you how it implements into the nodes. And I think that's it. So just demonstrating that. Is there anything else? Nope. So we're ready to render. Let's go ahead and click the render icon. And again, it's going to render out the frame that you're sitting on because we just want to render out one frame so we can have something visible when we're compositing these pieces together. Now, what I am going to do is make sure sample motion blur is turned off. You probably still had this on. Make sure you turn it off because that was just for the particle system. If this was turned on for this entire scene, this would be one very long render process. Because remember, it does 10 passes per frame. I could change the output right now. In fact, actually, let me go ahead and do that. So I don't need to do the sparks. Let's go up arrow. Let's go ahead and create a new directory. And we'll call this composite. So this is where the final composite's going. 3D composite, accept, and let's go ahead. Is there anything else I want to set up? Nope. So let's go ahead and click the render button. Open up this, make sure that's turned off. It's not going to save because we're just clicking render. It's going to buffer it within the system. And there we go. So I'm going to let this go through and render, and I'll be right back. I just want to show you what happens when it's rendering both elements. So you can see here it changed. That's because it's rendering out the face and the pocket watch. Okay, so join me, or no, sorry, I'll be right back after this is done. Blender just finished. So let's go ahead and switch our viewport over to the node editor. Click here, go to node editor. Now the first node editor is the material node editor. This is used for cycles rendering. We're not going to go into this one. The next one over though is the compositing. So down here, click this, and now we're in the compositing window. So right off the bat, in your case, if you click use nodes, it would automatically apply 2 nodes in here. And it's not going to do it to mine because I was playing with this earlier, then I deleted everything. And so it's not going to automatically apply it like it should to yours. So you should see 2 nodes. And the 2 nodes that you should see, let me hit Shift A, is you're going to see an output node of composite. Let me zoom in here. Middle mouse button scroll wheel allows you to zoom. Middle mouse button holding it down allows you to pan. And that should be it. So anyway, here's the compositing node, and you should also see Shift A, the input node of render layers. And then you'll see a line connecting between them. So this is the layout that happens when you click use nodes. All right. Now, of course, like I said, I was playing with it earlier and it just kind of didn't give me the option to reapply it as use nodes. So I'm going to add this option right here called backdrop, and that's going to apply my render layout to the background. Now yours might not go white, so don't panic. Whether you're seeing it see-through or white, it does not matter. But we'll fix this here in a sec. So to see this all together, we need to add an output node called view. So I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to go to output viewer, and this is probably what you were normally seeing. Let me go ahead and click and drag this, and there you have it. So now we're seeing this image because we're seeing it through the viewer in the background. Okay, You can also find your nodes under Add and down here, but I'm going to be using the Shift A from here on out. Okay, so we have the render node, it's going into the compositing node, and we're also using the viewer node to see it. Let's go ahead and combine this one with the face layer. So you can either click this and hit Shift C, Control V, Control C, Control V, and it makes a copy. I'm going to delete that, or you can go Shift A, and it's going to be an input node render layer. We're going to switch this one to the face. Now we need to combine these two. Because they're both solid alphas, we can go Shift A, and we're going to use color, alpha over. And if you roll over a line, it will automatically make connections, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to place it, let's say, somewhere about here. I'm going to draw this to the top layer. Now, the way the system works is the top layer is the actual bottom layer, and the bottom layer is the top layer. I know it gets a little confusing, but it's kind of the way it works. So let me type this one into the bottom layer and drag this one into the viewer. And voila. Let me just move this out of the way. This is the final composite node. You need it to export your whole scene, so that's why it's there. So now you're seeing the face on top of the elements. Okay, so let's take a look at the difference here. Remember when we added under the render layers this pass diffuse? You can see here that under my render layer for the face, I have a diffuse option. So that gives me the ability to just play with diffuse under that option. Now, of course, I'm not going to do that, but I'm just showing you how these add to the actual nodes. Okay, so if I had add specular, shadows, and emit, you would see all those nodes directly in here. Okay, so that's how this whole system works. Is there anything else about these individual layouts? No, that's pretty much it. Okay, so you can see how we can add two elements together. So let's go ahead and bring in the sparks, which is a movie clip. So we're going to go ahead and go Shift A on the keyboard, and we're going to go Input, and we're going to go down to, sorry, not Input. Yes, Input, movie clip right here. Put it right there, and we're going to choose Open. I'm going to go to the Export folder, go to Sparks, and choose the first spark. Actually, I'm going to hit A and select all the sparks. You need all of them. That's going to bring it in as a movie clip, and click Open Clip. So now it's in here as a movie file. Let's go ahead and combine these. So we're going to use another alpha over. So Shift A, and it's going to be color alpha over. And we're going to bring this one now to here, this one to here, and put it into the viewer. Okay, so now you can see here that I'm seeing the sparks added to the scene. Pretty cool. Now what this does gives you the ability to play with anything you want with these sparks that's in the node. So if I go Shift A, and let's go to the color, and let's do RGB curves. And I'm going to roll over the line this time so it automatically builds the connection. And I can actually play with how intense the particle system looks. So the sparks. So that's pretty cool. I can even play with the color. Let's maybe dial up a bunch of blue. Take the red, dial it way down. Maybe take the green, pull it down a little bit, and voila. Now I have blue sparks for whatever reason. So it's pretty cool. You can kind of composite together various different elements. I'm going to go ahead and hit X on the keyboard to cancel that. Grab this, drag it back over to image, and there we have it. So this is kind of the basic layout. If I wanted to, I can actually just go to export now and export the scene because I've added the particle system, the face, and the pocket watch all together. But I want to add that video clip to the face here. All right, so before we do, let's go ahead and go File, Save. So let's go ahead and add the movie clip node. I'm going to hit Shift A again to go into Input, Movie Clip. And we're actually going to pull this stuff back a little bit. All right, so we can zoom back in here. Maybe put this stuff closer to the viewer node. Maybe put the viewer node here. Something like that. Okay, because we want to do a lot of compositing into this thing. So I want to add let's go Open, Export, Footage, Open. So now here's the footage that we created, the video clip. I want to add it to the face of this. So this is kind of tricky. I have to kind of mix this correctly to get it to work. So I'm going to go ahead and go Shift A. We're going to go to Color, and we're going to go Mix. And the first layout, we're going to use the Alpha option here, and we're going to use Image here. Now, just to see what this looks like, I'm going to drag it to the Viewer node. And it's not what we want, but I'm going to change the Mix mode to Multiply. And now you can see that the video is just being applied to this area in here. All right, so let's move this down. So now I need to combine these to a solid factor that's not black and white, and then put it into this alpha over. So let's go ahead and go Shift A, and let's use another mix node. And this time I'm going to use the image option in the top, this into the bottom, this into here, and then just to see what it looks like, I'm going to drag this all the way to here. Okay, so now you can see that the movie clip is just being applied to the face and nothing else. Nothing else is being affected. In fact, I can click and drag this to here to make sure I'm not getting any weird distortion on that. So I'm not. I'm good. I'm happy. In fact, actually, might as well just bring this here. So now I can add the sparks. So this is a little bit more complicated. The reason why, again, I had to do it this way is because if I would have just added the regular mix with the plane and then put it in here, for some reason, this footage would have affected the pocket watch as well. I don't know why it mixes that way. So I figured the way to clamp it all together is to use this, the multiply node. Now, of course, I can decrease the factor of how much it's being applied. Okay, and if I can come back over here and decrease it actually here, so I maybe can get some of that color that I had rendered out before. And this allows me again to play with various different factors. So let's say I think my video clip is too large. Let me go ahead and go Shift A, and I'm going to go into look for scale node. Let's see, where was it? I think it's under distort maybe. Yep, scale. So I'm going to add this in here, and I can, let's say, bring this down to 0.5 just to show you. 0.5, and now you can see that the video clip is smaller. And let's bring up the Y a little bit. Let's go 0.8 maybe. 0.7. I just want to make it where it's kind of focusing inside. Now if I want to slide it around, I'm going to go ahead Shift A, and there's distort and translate. Let me tap this in here. And of course I can move it left or right or up and down. So let me drag it down a little bit. There we go. So now I've got the footage inside the watch. I can even play with maybe adding some contrast to it. Let's go color, curves, tap the curves in here. Let's spread this apart a little bit more. If you want to free up some space, you can actually click these little arrows and it will decrease some of these values. So they're just tiny little nodes. And let me bring this down. Just add a little bit of contrast. There we go. Let me here play with the mix a little bit more. All right, so I think I like that. Okay, so let's create a quick background. I'm going to actually create a new scene for the background. So up here, you can see that I only have one scene. Blender allows you to create multiple scenes within the same file. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the plus sign here. And I'm just going to say new. And I'm going to switch over to my 3D view. Okay, so here's our new scene. It has nothing in it. If I switch over to scene 1, you can see there's lots of stuff in it. All the stuff that we did before. Oops. I'm messing up my interface. Okay, so let's go ahead and, come on, I don't need this. Default. Scene 1. All right, so I'm going to create a quick plane, Shift A on the keyboard, mesh plane, and let me create a camera. Shift A, camera. I'm going to go ahead and go into its settings, rotation 0. Let me just reset all default values. 0, 0, 0. Let's see here, which one of these do I need? 90, this one. 90, I'm going to pull it straight back. And let's take the, in fact, actually, let's switch to the camera view, so 0 on the keyboard. And actually, sorry, I do need to rotate my plane. Nope. There we go. It's 90. Now I'll hit 0. And let's go ahead and scale this guy up to fit the overall view. That should be good. Okay, so let's go ahead and apply, excuse me, let's apply a material, new, and I'm going to go ahead and take the specular down to 0. maybe a little bit of specular. Okay, and the diffuse I'll take up to 100. Let me go ahead and go to texture. We're going to add a new texture. I'm going to switch it to clouds. Sorry, I'm going through this really quick. It's just that this is stuff that we've already done before. Switch this to maybe object. I'm going to switch my view mode to render. Oh yeah, we need a light. So Shift A. In fact, I'm going to generate 2 lights. Maybe something like that. Let's go into light panel. That's fine. Let's use sphere. Let's try something like that. Change this to red. I'm going to hit Control C, Control V. Move this guy over. Do something like that. This one will be blue. Okay. So let's see what that looks like. Go to the rendering tab, render. All right. So my cloud effect is not really showing up. So let's go ahead and jump back into the textures layer. First we need to select it. Let me go to escape, select it. Go back into rendering mode. And let's apply maybe some geometry. There we go. Now we're starting to see it. Let's take the size up to 1. Let's increase the detail level. Maybe even change. Let's try Veroni 1. Let's go 1.5. Let's try increasing the normal a little bit. That's not too bad, but my colors are switched the way I don't want them. So let me go ahead and exit out of this. Go back into solid mode. Okay, so this color seems to be blue. This one needs to be red. This one needs to be blue. Okay. That looks better, but probably need to play with. Let me go to the camera mode. Let's play with the distance fall off for these. So let's go ahead and hit escape, or sorry, solid. Let's decrease this guy's distance a little bit, and maybe increase this guy's distance a little bit. All right, that's better. Let's select it, go back into texture. Let's just see what changing the UV layout, see what generated looks like. It's actually a little bit softer. Let's increase the size. Okay, I think I like something like that. So once I'm happy with the look of what I'm getting, let's go ahead and render this out. So I'm going to go render tab, and I'm going to choose a destination. I'm going to save it to the export. Call it background. And background. We just need it to render 1 frame, so let's change. Sorry, my throat's starting to kill me. Start and end time 1:1. Sorry, I had to pause it for a sec. My voice was starting to go. So set it to 100, and I think everything else is good. Location, RGB, it doesn't really matter because it's a full scale image. Let's click animate. It's going to go through and render. Okay, so that's finished. Let's go ahead and switch back to our scene 1. And we're going to switch back to the nodes. Node editor. And we're going to add a node. Shift A. We're going to go input. This is going to be an image. Find the image. And we need to add this way over here. Let's drag these over. So we're going to hit Shift A, and we're going to do an alpha over. This one this time is going to be on the bottom, and this guy's going to be on the top because this is the background. Put it in the viewer just to see what it looks like, and voila. Now it's way too overpowering, so we're going to add a few extra nodes. Let's go color RGB curves, put this in here. Okay, that should probably work. And of course I can add a Shift A blur node. So filter, blur, and let's just go maybe 5 and 5 to kind of make it fall back into the background. It's probably not enough. Variable size, do I want to add a bokeh? No, it's not really dealing with light, so let's turn that off. Okay, that's better. Okay, so now we have our layout. We have a background. If you want, you can actually divide this screen up so we can see this full screen. Let's switch this over to the UV editor. Actually, no, we want to switch this over to... Well, it's usually UV editor that I switch it over to. Well, let me switch it to... I'm trying to think the best layout. Should be the display layout. I don't understand why we're not getting the feedback. Oh, let me put this into the final output. There we go. Okay, so that's the overall shot. I almost forgot. Again, this is very important that it all ties back into the final composite. The viewer is just for the background. Just so I can just use one window to composite my elements together. Some people don't like to have it in the background because it starts making things look difficult to see. So you can see here, here's the overall node structure. It looks a little complex, but as you know, as we went through, it's not really that hard. It's not really that complex. So you can see final output. Sorry, I'm repeating myself. My throat's killing me, so it's throwing me off right now. I think what I'm going to do is I could right now, we are technically done. We can actually just go to the animation button right now, make sure that our 0 to 360 frames is set. And I don't want 0. Oh, wow. I hope I didn't render out the particle system with compression now that I'm thinking about it. I don't remember. So I want to make sure there's no compression here. And we already have it saving to the 3D composite. And I can click render. Now, I think what I'm going to do is create a tutorial 10, and that's going to cover creating particle systems. Let's add a few more particle systems. We might even add a little bit of fire here in the front, composite that together, and then do a final render and bring it back into Blender. So yeah, I'm running out of time now to do it all in this one. So go ahead and join me for part 10, and we'll just add a little bit more spice to this, and then we'll do a final render.